Hello and welcome to another webinar training. I'm joined by Donata and Hans from Termageddon, which is over at termageddon.com. That's termageddon.com. They're policies for your websites that automatically update whenever the law changes. And it's written by real attorneys, not robots. I'm really excited to have Donata and Hans here today. You know, for the LMS industry, for people building online courses and membership sites, the website is the business. It's not just a marketing brochure for offline business. So having everything above board and legal without breaking the bank is important. And it's a question I get asked. I've been asked for probably 5.5 years since the beginning of LifterLMS. And like, where do I go to get the terms and conditions of my website? I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on the internet. Uh, and people want it without, spending a lot of money on legal fees. And I've hired lawyers for work, and they're really expensive if they're doing custom work for you. So I'm really excited to get into it with you. But first, let me just say, Hans and Donata, welcome to this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. And I just want to welcome Alan, Arnold, Jeff, Leonard, Matus, Ray. We've got some more people coming in. Please ask questions. We are going to do a Q&A at the end after we get into this. So if you have any questions about making your terms and conditions, your privacy policy, keeping it at a level of legal compliance is really important. Just ask away, use the chat, use the Q&A box. I would encourage you to stay to the end. We are going to be doing a LifterLMS $99 giveaway, which you can get one of our add-ons. If you're already a customer, we'll hook you up in a different way. And if you want to apply it against a bundle or something like that, we can do that as well. So stay to the end. Use the Q&A, ask lots of questions, and I'm going to hand it over to Donata and Hans. Take us home. How can the course creators, the people building training-based membership sites, people building online coaching and education businesses level up their legal compliance?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
And
thank you for having us.
I have to admit, anyone listening to this, especially live on a Friday, any discussion about privacy policy and terms, I'm already impressed that you're listening. It's, and we will try to keep it as entertaining as possible. What we're trying to do today is kind of remove the barrier that I think everyone feels, which is like, this stuff is intimidating, therefore I'm not going to look at it and pretend it doesn't exist. And what you'll see shortly here is that is unfortunately not going to be reality very soon here. Businesses of any size will need to not only have a privacy policy in place, most likely terms and conditions in place too, but they're also going to need a strategy to keep it up to date when the laws change. And hopefully we can speak to that, why that exists, why that problem exists, and how Termageddon's a potential solution, as well as other potential solutions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now more than ever, people are turning online to learn, whether it's, to learn something that will improve their business or something that will improve their life, or maybe just something that will relax them. I think right now it's more online learning is really having a boom, and people are searching for it. And so we're hoping to make this webinar accessible and easy to understand for anybody who creates online courses of any kind, just how to protect yourself and how to protect your business and protect your course. So that's really our hope with this.
Awesome. Here, I'm going to set this up.
Okay. So a couple things that we're going to be talking about. We'll talk about who Hans and I are. What is collecting personally identifiable information? What courses need a privacy policy and why? What is the terms of service? What are its benefits? Why do you need one? What is the disclaimer? What are the benefits of having a disclaimer, and where you can get policies so you can get all set up? So we're hoping for this to be like a all-encompassing class with hopefully a very minimal amount of legal jargon and confusing things. We'll try to make this as easy to understand as possible. But if you do have any questions, let us know, and we'd be happy to answer them throughout as well. So a little bit about me. My name is Donata, and I'm the president of Termageddon. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in Illinois. I'm also a certified information privacy professional. I'm the engineer behind all of the policy questions in text and the different variations in Termageddon. So we create privacy policies. And I'm the one who has written all the questions, written all the text, and I also make sure that our policies are up to date with the law. So I spend a lot of my time tracking laws, which I'm sure everybody knows is very exciting, but it is actually exciting for me.
Like
I actually love it so much, and I hate how much I love it. It's, yeah. I am the chair of the International Association of Privacy Professionals, Chicago chapter. I'm also the editor of the e-Privacy Committee newsletter of the American Bar Association. I've also held courses about the General Data Protection Regulation at the Illinois State Bar Association. And we'll talk about GDPR a little bit later, but it's European Union law that protects the personal information of EU residents. So I really enjoyed my time at the ABA, at the IABP and ISBA, kind of just teaching other lawyers and other professionals on what privacy is, why it's important, and if they are writing privacy policies, what those policies should contain.
I like how my background's like a sentence.
I made your text larger.
So my name is Hans. I'm the vice president of Termageddon. I handle sales and marketing for the company. Prior to Termageddon, I ran a 12-person web agency for 7 years in downtown Chicago. And almost a year to date, I sold my agency and made the decision to go full-time Termageddon, which has been awesome. Donata and I are engaged. We're going to get married in October. And, you know, being able to work with my soon-to-be wife has been an amazing experience.
Congratulations.
All that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm looking for a raise. So.
Yeah, his salary is contingent upon the joy of working with me.
But yeah, no, I handle sales and marketing. I do a lot of client communications, just helping them understand things. I'll tell you what, like, you know, a year ago, I was so intimidated by privacy policies and terms and conditions. And I think like 2 weeks in, I'm like, okay, this is really not that difficult. Just like anything else in life, you have to learn what's going on, and then you just need to act on it. And that's what I'm really proud of Termageddon. And I think we've done a pretty good job at demystifying what all these privacy laws are about and enabling people to protect their business, which we believe is extremely important for small business owners.
Yeah, so maybe let's get started with privacy policies, who needs them and why. So we're going to try to keep definitions and terms to an absolute minimum, but I personally thought that this one was really important to understand, and it kind of builds the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. So personally identifiable information, or PII, is any data that could identify an individual. So for example, somebody's name, email, phone number, or physical address. And any website that has a contact form is collecting PII. So if your online course has a contact form where people can contact you, you are collecting PII. If it has a place where people can sign up for newsletter updates for, you know, your upcoming launches, and you ask for their name and email, you know, that's also collecting PII. Same thing with, you know, surveys, for example, that you're creating for your courses, that could collect PII. And then also billing portals where people purchase your courses. So all of those different areas are, you know, where your website or where your course collects PII. And for our first kind of most important takeaway from this webinar is any website that collects PII should have a privacy policy. So if your website has a contact form, a newsletter form, a billing portal, a survey, stuff like that, that should be your first kind of light bulb going off saying, I need to have a privacy policy. Now, when I was a kid, I would always ask why. I really wouldn't do anything unless I understood why I had to do it. So for people like me, you know, why does the collection of PII matter? You know, why does that light bulb need to be going off? Why should I have a privacy policy even though some of my competitors might not, or some of the other businesses that I know don't have one? So really you should have a privacy policy because privacy laws regulate the collection, use, and disclosure of PII. So privacy laws are laws that have been implemented to protect consumers or residents or citizens of a particular state or country. And privacy laws really require certain websites to disclose what PII you collect, what is done with that PII, and who that PII is shared with. Now, just to be clear, privacy laws require you to disclose a lot more than that, but this is really just the meat and potatoes of what a privacy policy should have. And the required disclosures are usually made in the privacy policy. So when a user goes onto your website and they're giving you their personal information, they really need to know what you do with that information, who you share it with, and other disclosures. And usually they will go to privacy policy to find that out. So we have certain laws that protect PII. And the ones that are kind of the main laws in the US and the EU are the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. I know most people have probably heard of this one just because of the freak out that was going on in 2018. I don't know if anybody remembers the thousands of emails that we got from every single vendor saying they've updated their privacy policy, but that's kind of what spurred that. So a little bit about who the GDPR applies to. So it applies to businesses that are located in the European Union, businesses that offer goods or services to European Union residents, regardless of that business's location, or businesses that monitor the behavior of European Union residents, again, regardless of that business's location. So if you are selling your course to people in Germany, to people in France, you need to make sure that you are GDPR compliant, even though you yourself are physically located in the US. In terms of what laws we have in the United States, we have the California Online Privacy Protection Act of 2003, which applies to websites that collect the PII of consumers located in California, regardless of that business's location. So if your course's website could be accessed by somebody from California and they could submit their personal information on your site, you need to make sure that you're CalOPA compliant. Next, we have the California Consumer Privacy Act, or the CCPA. That one went into effect January 1st, and it applies to any for-profit business that has annual revenues of $25 million, annually buys, receives, sells, or shares the PII of 50,000 or more California residents, or derives 50% or more of its annual revenue from selling the PII of California residents as well. This one kind of has a, has a large business exemption. So if you're a smaller business that doesn't deal with a lot of data, you might not need to worry about the CCPA. But if you are working with larger companies, they could require you to be CCPA compliant by contract. So just make sure and see whether or not any of your contracts with your customers have changed or your vendors have changed in the last few months, because they will say whether or not you need to comply with that by contract. And then finally, we have Nevada's revised statute 603A, which applies to commercial websites that collect the personal information of Nevada residents and enter into a transaction with a Nevada consumer, has nexus with Nevada, or purposely directs its activities towards Nevada. Now that one's a little bit more confusing as to who it applies to, but if you have any Nevada customers, that one definitely applies to you. So I think one thing that a lot of these privacy laws have in common is that they protect the consumers of a particular state and not the businesses. So maybe Hans could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it is really important to remember, like fact number one, which Donata showed earlier, if you are collecting personal information, you should have a privacy policy, and you should also have a strategy to keep it up to date when the laws change. And we'll speak to that shortly here. But the second biggest thing to take away is privacy laws do not care about where your business is located. This is a common misconception we hear all the time. Oh, I'm not located in California, therefore I don't need to comply with the CCPA. This is false. That is not the reason. Now CCPA does have some business limit restrictions. Maybe you don't have to comply with CCPA for a different reason, but you need to understand privacy laws do not care about where businesses are located. They are only out to protect the citizens of that state or country. This is important to note because, do we have a slide on the upcoming privacy laws?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll speak to it shortly, but it's really important to remember that where your business is located does not matter. All that matters is, are you offering your services, and do you have customers in other areas outside of your state?
Yeah, and for anybody who's listening that is outside of the US or the EU, there's also different privacy laws in Canada and Australia.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind as well. And some of those might be a little bit more narrowly defined. But again, if you are doing business in those areas, you need to be cognizant of the fact that you might need to have a privacy policy that has very specific disclosures. Yeah.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then, do you want me to take this?
Sure.
All right. So, just to reiterate, point number one, if you're collecting personal information, you should have a privacy policy. Point number two, privacy laws do not care about where a business is located. They're only out to protect the citizens of that state or country, or continent, technically, with the EU. So what is happening in America is really, really interesting. We do not have a federal law for privacy. And what we have are individual states proposing their own privacy laws. And we provide a list here. It is crazy how often this gets updated. To say the least, it's Donata's full-time job. But we have individual states proposing their own privacy laws to protect their citizens. The problem with this is that each of these bills are unique. New York, for example, is proposing a bill that will enable their citizens to sue businesses of any size located anywhere for having as little as a contact form without a privacy policy. This is really important to know, and this is the third thing I want to share with everyone. You need to have a strategy to keep your policies up to date. You need to have either a privacy attorney in place, using a company like Termageddon that monitors the privacy laws for you. You need to have a strategy to have someone somewhere monitoring these privacy laws for you so they can push the appropriate new disclosures that are required by these new laws. Otherwise, you could face privacy-related fines or lawsuits. And the fines are currently, the ones in place that's not shared, range from $2,500 to $7,500 per infringement. That does not mean you get one $7,500 fee if you screw up. That means you have a $7,500 fee per website visitor that you've not obeyed the laws by. So that is really important. Now, what we discuss here in this visual, and if anyone does want to link to this, it's in our blog, and we can provide it to Chris to provide to everyone. But we have columns here with what each and every section requires. And as you'll see, privacy policy changes, the first column, that shows that every single one of these laws, once enacted, will require updates to your privacy policy, most likely. Do you want to talk about the other ones?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of like privacy policy changes, I think what's really interesting is that a lot of people might think that, here's a privacy law and it just requires me to disclose what information I collect, how I use it, and who I share it with. But, everybody has to justify their existence. So our wonderful legislatures have said, have come up with very, very specific things that a privacy policy needs to include. So for example, one of the things that California has us include is whether or not your website responds to do not track signals. Nevada is requiring websites to say whether or not they sell personal information and how users can opt out of that sale or opt out of future sales. So there's very different requirements with each of these bills, and they need to be read very carefully just to make sure that your privacy policy is compliant. In terms of business size limits, some states have decided that the laws would apply to large businesses only. So for example, annual revenue of 25 million or more. Consumers can sue. This would allow consumers to have a direct right to sue a business instead of going through a state's attorney general. Most of the privacy laws right now are being enforced by states' attorney generals and by the Federal Trade Commission. But if consumers can sue businesses directly, obviously we'll see a big uptake in litigation, just like we've seen with the American with Disabilities Act and websites. I'm sure some people are aware of that. So, once consumers can sue, that really increases the risk of litigation. The right to access data would basically mean that as a consumer, I have a right to access, to ask your company to show me what data you have on me. And you would have to show me all of the data that you have on me from all of the different sources where you keep that data. Right to delete data, this one's really popular, is as a consumer, I would have the ability to ask a business to delete my data. And there are exceptions to this, but, in most instances, a business would have to just delete that data. Right to correct data. So if you have my name as Donut instead of Donata in your CRM, I would be able to ask you to correct that and to change it into the correct spelling. Right to restrict processing. You can use my data for certain processes, but not for others. So for example, I could say you can use my data to process my order, but you can't use my data for direct marketing. So all of a sudden you can't send me email newsletters. And I think that that's something that's really important for course creators as well, because a lot of that marketing is done through emails of new courses, new launches, new content. So the right to restrict processing would, kind of disable the ability to send emails or process data in other ways. Right to opt out. Every single bill has this right, and it's the right to opt out of sales of data. So I'm not sure if anybody's seen on some websites at the bottom, you'll see, please do not sell my information. And that basically means that that company is selling your information. And if you're a California resident, you have the right to tell them no.
In other words, if you're not a California resident, you currently have no right to tell companies not to sell your data, which is, when you say it the reverse way, kind of, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait till that right comes to like Illinois. I'm going to be exercising my rights everywhere.
So first time I'll be exercising this year, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Dad
Lockdown jokes.
I got the dad jokes.
Opt-in consent required. This one's really popular in Europe with GDPR. Basically, you have to get the user's consent to take their data in the first place. And unfortunately, we don't have that in the US, and none of the proposed bills have that, but maybe someday. Right to portability means that as a consumer, I would have the right to ask a business to take my data and give it to me in a machine-readable format so I can transport it to your competitor. So for example, if I'm using Facebook and I don't really like it that much, I don't like the privacy concerns that come with it, Facebook would have to give me all of my data and I could take it to another platform similar to that. Against automated decision-making is making decisions by a computer or machine only without any human intervention that has legal consequences. Some of these laws allow consumers to stop that practice, so you'd have to have human intervention when making big decisions. Imposes fiduciary duty. That basically means that the business would have to act in the best interest of the consumer and their data. This is kind of a remnant of financial laws, and New York has that duty that they would impose if the law were to pass. And I think that's pretty appropriate considering that they have, spent so much time and finance there. And then prohibits discrimination, which basically means that you can't discriminate against somebody that has exercised their privacy rights. So if I ask you to access my data, you all of a sudden can't charge me $100 more for that particular service just because I exercise my privacy rights.
Or you can't give them a different user experience as well on the website.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So as more and more consumers are more interested in their privacy online, more and more bills get proposed and passed, and more restrictions go into businesses. So that's something that's very important to keep in mind, is that your privacy policy is not just a document where you can write it and then forget about it for the next 10 years. It's really like a constantly updating thing.
Now, we spent a lot of time on this slide, but I think just to reiterate for anyone who kind of started to be like, oh, this is so intimidating, you know, this is reality. and I don't mean to be like in a joking manner, really. It's just, this is what's happening with privacy. This is what we see on the privacy side of things. And it's super important for people with online courses, especially, to really take it all in, that each and every one of these states has their own set of rules to protect their own citizens. This can become a scalability issue if not addressed. And that's, yeah, we'll talk about us later and talk about other solutions as well later.
And in terms of, you know, people are saying, okay, well, you know, that's a lot and I'm just going to ignore it. There are penalties that come with not complying with privacy laws. And those penalties can range from $2,500 per violation to $5,000 per violation to 20 million euros in total. And per violation doesn't mean per day, per month, per year. It means per website visitor whose privacy rights you infringed on. So for example, even if you have 100 visitors from California to your website per month, that can really add up to a very, very large sum. And I know that there's a very common misconception in our industry that small companies are not getting fined. And unfortunately, that's just not true. Especially in the European Union for GDPR violations, we've seen fines being imposed on one-person marketing companies, on small grocery stores, you know, and these fines can be large. And you don't need to have millions of customers. We've seen fines that, you know, businesses have been fined for not respecting the privacy rights of one person. So it doesn't have to be, you know, consistent violations of many different provisions or many different consumers. It can be just one. I
know of earlier this year, there was a one-person company, I think a one-person marketing company, that was fined 60,000 euro for changing the email address of one of their subscribers without consent.
Yeah.
So let's let that sink in for a second. I mean, when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like who am I handling my subscriptions correctly? 60,000 euros, like that is, they're really making statements. And Europe is about a year and a half ahead of America, I would say, like maybe 2 years. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's interesting too is that, like, for example, the CCPA will be enforced July 1st. And with the COVID-19 going on and all of that, a lot of industries are asking the California Attorney General to postpone that enforcement until, you know, later in the year or maybe even next year. But the California Attorney General has said no. So they said that they're still going to enforce that law starting July 1st. And they actually said potentially even earlier. So, you know, just because bad things are happening out in the world right now does not mean that this is just going to be swept under the rug. And whether or not that's the right decision, that's up to the Attorney General. But, you know, that's something to keep in mind too.
So other reasons why you should consider having a privacy policy. More than 70% of organizations say they receive significant business benefits from privacy. And I think that fact, I think you can expand on that better than I could, because this is the study you watched, right?
Yeah, so it was a study done by Cisco of a lot of different organizations in the US and around the world. And basically 70% of organizations said that they receive significant business benefits from privacy, which would mean like reduced breaches, reduced cost of breaches, reduced customer complaints, things like that.
Yep. Other reasons, some other reasons outside of the fact that privacy is becoming a bigger and bigger discussion. A lot of people say that there's an SEO benefit to having a privacy policy and terms and conditions in place. Google has trust being a ranking factor, and a lot of people believe having a privacy policy helps your SEO. That's another thing that I think is super important to remember. Outside of the fact, like, okay, there's these concerns, I want to avoid fines and lawsuits, blah, blah, blah. The fact is, like, what we're sharing here on this slide, concerns are growing. And, like, rather than this looking as a reactionary thing to avoid fines and lawsuits, like, look at it also as, like, a pro thing. Like, I don't think it's, like, as a human being, I don't think it's the worst thing that we as humans can tell companies, get rid of my data, and they have to. Don't sell my data, and they have to. They have to listen to you. So I think there's something profound about just standing on the right side of history too. Like thinking, you know what, I'm going to be proactive about this and disclose people, this is what I do with your data. Even if you're not selling it, the fact is you're most likely sharing it. So many companies I help with set up their policies for say, well, I don't share my information with anyone. And I'm like, well, do you have an email newsletter subscription? Yeah. Okay, so you're sharing that information with MailChimp or ActiveCampaign or whatever it may be. Do you have an e-commerce system? Yes. Okay. Are you sharing your data with Stripe or PayPal? And it always is yes. So sharing data is something that happens more than I think most small businesses even realize.
Yeah, and some other important studies that Hans wanted to skip over.
Well, we're a little pressed for time here. We're over halfway through.
Not.
Okay.
We're not pressed.
Okay.
People want to hear about this. By popular demand, other reasons to have a privacy policy. So different study found that privacy concerns are having a major impact on the behavior of consumers online. So that basically means that some consumers will not use certain platforms due to privacy concerns. They will just leave those platforms. So, I mean, that's something that any small business does not want happening to them, because each customer is really important. And you want to make sure that people are having a good experience, that they don't leave or they don't go to a competitor. So having a privacy policy will help curb that. 58% of US-based respondents are concerned about their privacy and security of their personal information. Now, what that means is that 58% of the US population are pressing their congressmen, pressing their representatives to pass these privacy laws. And that's really what's driving all of these privacy laws as well, is consumer interest. And after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, consumer interest in their privacy and security went through the roof, and that's why we have all of these privacy bills. And 79% of Americans are very or somewhat concerned about how companies use the data that they collect. Now, having a privacy policy is a wonderful way to answer that question, because it will literally say how you use the data that you collect. So 79% of the consumers that visit your website, they might be concerned about that. They look at your privacy policy, and here you go. It says how you use the data, who you share it with, and that alleviates a lot of that concern. It stops customer questions. It kind of moves them along the purchasing path. And even though I didn't put it on the slide, there was a study by Cisco that found that privacy concerns can slow down the sales cycle by an average of 7.8 weeks, which is a really, really long time if you are in a small business environment, right? Like, you don't want to delay your sales by 8 weeks. That's crazy, just over something that's, having a privacy policy or having privacy information. So yeah, that's really our wrap up on the privacy policy side of things. We're also going to talk about terms of service and disclaimers. Do you think that we should look at the questions now, or
it's actually a really good
should
call.
We wait till later?
That's a really good call. Chris,
Okay.
Can we open it up? Have we gotten any questions yet?
We just have one so far, and I think you've kind of touched on it, but the concern is is about what is the importance of a privacy policy page if most people don't, quote, look at it. Like,
So I'd be happy to start with this. So, I'll be the first to admit, like, I don't read every single terms and conditions that I agree to when I go and update my app. I don't. Now, that being said, I have noticed myself more so looking at privacy policies, at least glancing. Glancing is infinitely more than not looking at them, which is what I used to do. Now I kind of like, all right, what do I got? Let me just take a quick look and see what they're doing here. And actually, I can confirm that there is an actual business that I did not do business with because they had the do not sell my data page or do not sell my information page. And I saw that at the bottom of their site. And then I looked further into it and it's like, oh my gosh, if I submitted my information here, they were going to sell my information to a bunch of people. And I was about to get like 25 phone calls. So I think you're right. I'm not going to ignore the fact that there's many, many people that just don't read it. But the fact is, let's just say that trend continues, which I disagree with. I don't think it will continue, but let's just say theoretically it does. It doesn't stop people from the private right of action, the ability to sue businesses for not having a privacy policy. It does not stop governments from pushing fines. The fact is, if complaints come in, you will get pursued. And that's what really needs to be taken into consideration as well.
Yeah, and I think, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, nobody did read the privacy policies and nobody looked at them. But I think now that is really changing. And I think one thing that I've seen myself that I've been pretty surprised about is all of these studies that say that consumers are interested and that they are reading them. Because honestly, I thought it was just me with like a tinfoil hat sitting in my basement reading all of these. But turns out that that's just not the case anymore. More and more consumers are reading them. More consumers are leaving sites that don't have a privacy policy on them. And I think maybe a good analogy here would be the SSL certificate.
Yeah, that's a great call.
Yeah.
So back when I was running my agency, maybe it was like 5 years ago, where having an SSL certificate to secure your website, I'm like, okay, yeah, you need that for e-commerce websites and that's about it. Like, it's kind of nice to have beyond that, but who cares? Well, that changed.
Right.
SSL certificates kind of became a big deal. What I think that's such a good analogy because nowadays we look at websites that are not secure and we're like, I don't feel safe on this website. Like, there's like an inner like, oh, this is unsafe. Why am I even on this website? And I would say, I really would strongly suggest taking that into consideration when considering the fact that privacy is becoming more important, not less important over time. In the past, I'm the first to admit, like, yeah, I ignored it. And I would say nowadays I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I will look at them a little bit more closely. In the future, I think it's all about asking what's going to happen in the future. And I think without a doubt, it's going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger deal based on trends, based on everything that's happening. But even if it isn't, it doesn't mean that there aren't laws saying you have to have it and you could be fined or sued. So I think those are two really good things to consider.
Yeah, I wonder if one day it's going to be something similar like to the SSL certificate on Google where it says this website is unsafe. Maybe it'll be this website does not provide you privacy protections or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to go into advanced settings and then
access
it that way.
Or Google just admitting, hey, we rank this for SEO as an incentive to push it. I mean, I could see that happening first, and then I could just say it's required by law. I could totally see that.
Yeah.
So
are there any other questions about privacy policies there?
Yeah, we got another one that just came in from Mateus. Does your service, Termageddon, provide policies compatible with all U.S. states and with the European Union?
Yes.
Yeah, we are compatible with all U.S. businesses, meaning that like we ask questions like, what state were you formed in? What county do you want to resolve disputes in? We provide compliance with like GDPR with the European Union, but compatibility, we are only compatible with U.S. businesses right now. That being said, over the coming weeks, because of our growth, we've decided to expand into Canada compatibility, UK compatibility, and Australia compatibility. So over the following weeks, we'll be launching our services to allow businesses located in those countries to also sign up with Termageddon. But we already provide the compliance for like GDPR and stuff. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. And we do have a link in the chat to get to termageddon.com. And they've been generous to give us a 10% off coupon code, which is just LifterLMS. Yep. So thanks for the question, Mateus.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Should we move into terms of service?
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to ask more privacy related questions, whatever you wish. All right. Terms of service.
Yeah.
So can I start off? Real quick?
Sure.
All right. So let the non-lawyers
Yeah.
speak about terms of service. You know, everyone I'm sure is happy to hear that. So just real quick, this blew my mind. Terms of service, terms of use, terms and conditions, they all mean the same thing. Okay, that's what I wanted to share.
Okay. All right. Now that
I'm
we've had that,
I'm helping.
now that we've had that valuable insight, terms of service, who needs it and why?
And there it is.
Yeah. So, you know, most websites will have terms of service on there, but a lot of people don't actually know what it is. So terms of service, terms of use, terms and conditions, TOS, it's an agreement between the operator of a website and the visitor or user of that website that spells out the rules of using that website. So if you were to come to my house and I tell you, please take your shoes off, that would be a terms of service for my home. It's kind of similar with your website. So there are some benefits to having a terms of service, and a terms of service really does a lot of different things, and it's kind of a catch-all to all of the rules that come with visiting your website. So first, in the terms of service, you could answer frequently asked customer questions. So for example, what is your refund policy and whether a user can cancel their purchase? So if I'm running an online course and I have some downloadable guides, let's say one of the users downloaded those guides and they're unable to view them on their computer due to a software error or something like that. As a user, can I get a refund for that? The terms of service will explain that. It will also say when you can get a refund. So like incompatibles, didn't like it, like decided I didn't want it, only with a receipt, things like that. And also if a user can cancel their purchase, so if they bought your course, never accessed it, and then decided to change their mind, you know, can they cancel their purchase? Would they get their money back? Things like that. They can also spell out the warranty that you offer on your courses. This can help reduce disputes and mitigate damages. So for example, if you are teaching a course on Facebook marketing and the user uses your Facebook course for marketing and gets really bad results, or gets flagged by Facebook because they wrote something in that they weren't supposed to write in, or they're advertising products or services that are banned off of Facebook, you know, you can spell out that warranty that you offer. So you could say, you know, this is really up to you to decide what the best course of action is for your business. What I'm telling you in my course might not work for everybody. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that, you know, the lesser of warranty you have, the less likely it is that you're going to be liable for damages. And obviously none of us want that. So your terms of service can make sure that you are protected. You can also protect your intellectual property by saying that all courses and course materials on your website belong to you. I'm sure this has happened to a lot of people on this course, but you know, many people will take worksheets and ebooks and content and like full on courses and completely copy them and say that they created them when in reality they didn't. You know, if your course is
Right back.
is the dog barking? Yeah. Sorry. The joys of working from home. But you know, if somebody steals all your stuff, it's a great way to point back and say, look, in my terms of service, I said that all of this belongs to me. Or if you're selling like worksheets or something like that, you obviously don't want people to copy them and give them to their friends, because then they won't buy the course from you. They'll just take this copyrighted thing and use it instead of purchasing your course and purchasing the worksheets. So really the terms of service will say, like, you can't copy the materials given to you, you can't resell them, stuff like that. And everything that's on this website, including the course, including the worksheets, including everything else, are intellectual property. You can't take it. Terms of service can help also avoid copyright infringement suits by helping you place you in a Digital Millennium Copyright Act safe harbor. So the DMCA has a way to create a safe harbor for people who upload stuff onto their website, maybe not necessarily knowing that that item is copyrighted. It basically provides users with your email and address and phone number where they can contact you to ask you to take the stuff down instead of going to sue you automatically. So that's something that's really helpful too, especially if you're uploading like graphics or pictures or content. You know, you make sure that you avoid copyright infringement suits by providing your information in there in the right format. Obviously, that could help provide you with a safe harbor. Now, in terms of what else it can help you do, so it can choose where you would like to resolve disputes. So let's say I'm located in Chicago, which I'm in the suburbs, and I sell my services all over the world. And somebody from California purchases my service, doesn't like it, and I get into trouble with that, and they sue me. My terms of service can say that I would like to resolve all disputes in Illinois, because that's obviously going to be a lot cheaper for me than flying myself out and my evidence and everything else into California. So you can really choose where you would like to resolve disputes, which would save you time and money. It can lessen the amount of damages that you may be responsible for in case something goes wrong. So this is a bunch of like lawyer boilerplate that we always add. But for example, let's say somebody takes your course and ends up, let's see, what's a good example here would be. And let's say they end up, you're selling a course for embroidery. And they end up injuring themselves while embroidering. You can lessen the amount of damages to the actual cost of the embroidering course instead of the entire damages of them going to the hospital, which obviously can save thousands and thousands of dollars. You can lessen the amount of damages that you're responsible for. Protecting yourself in case of a third-party websites having viruses. So I know a lot of websites will link to Facebook, Twitter, different blogs, stuff like that. If that website has a virus and somebody went from your website to that website and got a virus, you could potentially be held liable for that. And a terms of service will help protect you. And then lastly, keep your website a welcoming place for everybody. So I know a lot of courses will have comment sections or will have roundtable discussions where people can share ideas and, you know, share their successes or their failures. And anybody who's ever been on the internet knows there's some jerks on here. And, you know, having a terms of service can help you kick those jerks out, delete their comments, stuff like that. So you can keep your website a wholesome and good place where everybody can have a good experience, and you know, terminate accounts, delete comments, stuff like that of people who are not abiding by that. So yeah, that's really what the terms of service is for.
Awesome. Now, should we hop into some questions if any have arisen, Chris?
Yeah, we got a couple questions here. If Mateus is asking, if I offer services for all U.S. states, then do I need to generate different content for the policies and terms depending upon the location of the user, or do you provide one content template compatible with all regulations in all states?
So you would have one that's compatible with all regulations in all states. There has been some companies that will have a different privacy policy for, let's say, California residents only. But that can be really confusing to users, especially like if they're traveling. Like, let's say I'm a California resident, but I'm in New York right now. That can be really confusing for people. So usually what's been recommended is to have one that kind of has all the relevant things for every resident of every state that has a law. Now, the rights that consumers get on your website would be broken down by different states, because different states have different rights, or you can choose to give those rights to everybody. So, I mean, that's something that we have chosen to do at Termageddon, is we give GDPR rights to every visitor, regardless of where they're located. And that's a pretty big movement. But regardless of that and the ethics of all of that, you can choose whether or not you want to provide the rights to that state's resident or to everybody. But usually you'd have one privacy policy for everyone.
Yeah, and just to add my 2 cents here, Mateus asked a great question. It's something I actually asked Donata a year ago. You know, should we have a different policy for each and every citizen of each and every state? And she provided her feedback as to why that probably is not an ideal right. And we're certainly monitoring it, seeing like if that's ever done the other way. But I've really come over to the side of having one policy because of the scalability issue. The fact is, if you have different citizens that you're giving different rights to, you're going to have a lot of back-end work of who gets what. Whereas, you know, like through the Termageddon questionnaire, for example, we say, you know, do you want to extend these rights to all of your users? And by saying, and at first you're like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that, but all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense, because if you just have it one simple way, now you as a business owner have way less where's this person from, what rights do they have, where you try to standardize as much as possible.
Yeah. Also, if we were to have like a different privacy policy for each state, you would end up with like 50 of them.
Yeah,
which would be like really confusing and very cluttered and very hard to find. So we definitely recommend having one if you can.
Another question, just for we have people in the health and fitness niche. So if, let's say there's a yoga course or like a dancing course, and somebody breaks their leg or has a knee injury, and they want to go after the website owner who was teaching dance or yoga online, what type of thing could they have in their terms and conditions for that sort of medical related thing?
Yeah, so it's kind of two different things that you would have if you're selling like health coaching or, you know, workouts. So first you would have a terms of service that says that there's no warranty on any of the exercises or any of the products or services listed on the site. But then you would also have a disclaimer, and we'll talk about that next. So if you've ever seen those like workout videos from the 90s, and at the very start it like comes in and it's like, do not continue if you feel like you're gonna die.
Yeah.
That's a disclaimer. So you would have a specific health or fitness products or services disclaimer on your website, which would help protect you in that sense.
That's great. We've got another question from Mateus. Does Termageddon support also mental health related services like psychological counseling?
So it really depends on whether or not HIPAA would apply to you at that point. So if HIPAA does apply to the services, then we don't cover HIPAA.
Can you explain what HIPAA is?
Yeah, so HIPAA is a law that protects the health information of patients. So for example, if I go to the emergency room right now because I broke my foot, all of the information that they collect about me, like my name, my health history, my prescriptions, my x-rays, like what treatment they gave me, would be protected by HIPAA, which is basically a very stringent law in the United States that protects the health information of patients, which makes sense because patient information is a lot more sensitive. You know, it's a lot more sensitive to know that, you know, somebody's gotten counseling for depression than it is that they bought juice the other day, right? So if HIPAA applies to you, if you are a medical provider, if you're a psychiatrist, it might also even apply to psychologists and their services. You need very specialized compliance. And at that point, we would recommend that you go to an attorney. So because we're a generator, we try to keep costs low for most of our clients. So we don't undertake certain industries, for example, HIPAA compliance or websites that collect information from children under the age of 13. And that just helps us keep costs reasonable. But if you are providing those types of services that are covered under HIPAA, you would need to speak to an attorney about that because it's a very highly regulated field.
That's awesome. And since we're on the topic, could you just expand a little bit more? Because we do get this question a lot. If like if somebody's like a health coach versus a doctor or whatever, so like health coach, maybe some videos that you follow along with, maybe a meal plan, maybe some workout plans. You know, if I have a website that's like Chris's 6 weeks to six pack abs or whatever, at what
I would agree with
line
that.
I would.
at what line do we cross the HIPAA? Like, I mean, what's the difference between a health coach and a doctor? Just like, I just see people get hung up on this a lot, especially if they're trying to help people with health related issues. Like, when do they cross the line? Or where should they go to find out if HIPAA is in play or not?
So there's a lot of different government websites that will talk about HIPAA, so you can just search that on Google. But it really applies to health services providers. So I would say that, you know, if you have like a very generic meal plan that's the same for everybody, like let's say I want to lose weight, I get meal plan A. Let's say I want to gain muscles, I get meal plan B. You're probably fine. But if you're asking people their, you know, health backgrounds, like do you have diabetes?
Pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, do you have pre-existing
Yeah.
conditions? Stuff like that can really kind of push you into that realm. If you are, you know, providing health services like acupuncture or something like that, you know, the information that you collect might be under HIPAA. Chiropractor, same thing. But if you're just running a yoga class where, you know, Jane Doe at janedoe@gmail.com signs up and gets the class and you don't ask her for any other information, you know, then you're probably fine. But, you know, it really depends on whether or not you're licensed by your state to provide those health services, stuff like that. And I know the government has a lot of resources on this. So I'd really just search Google, you know, what the profession is that you're in, and then just ask whether or not HIPAA applies to you because the government does have resources on that. But you should be really careful anytime you're collecting very sensitive information like what is your psychiatric history? What medication do you take? Like asking somebody about an allergy to a food is different than saying, have you had depression in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mateos is asking does HIPAA only apply to businesses that are located in the United States?
That's a good one. I think so, yes. Or to businesses that treat American patients, maybe. I'm not an expert on HIPAA, I have to say, but I do think it would be at least, you know, healthcare providers that are located in the U.S. and then possibly healthcare providers that are collecting the information of U.S. patients.
Yeah, that would be where the biggest indicator would be. Are you collecting? I think it's U.S. only, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that other countries have their own versions of HIPAA.
Yeah,
I would definitely say that that is most likely the case, especially in first world countries.
I know under like GDPR, collecting health information is considered sensitive information, which brings in a lot more different considerations and requirements to keep in mind.
So it's all about what are you collecting, you know, and if you're collecting like questions like diabetes, do you have diabetes, you know, have you suffered from a stroke? Like these are questions that are HIPAA related.
Yeah, that are red flags.
Yeah.
I think also
asking for a name and credit card is not.
Yeah, I think I would also like throw in a little bit tidbit here. A tip for anybody is make sure that you collect the minimum amount of information that you actually need. So I was on a website the other day that was asking me for my birth date to sign up for a newsletter. I'm like, no, that's not happening. So if you don't need certain information, don't collect it just to have it. I think that really opens people up to privacy violations and to data breaches too.
That's awesome. And Mateus is just adding to the conversation from his in his research or whatever, HIPAA applies to psychotherapy and psychological counseling, but not to quote coaching. So just to maybe he's in that niche or whatever. But
Interesting. Yeah, we've had some conversations with some HIPAA experts, and they confirmed, like, even if you have a doctor's website, but you don't have like patient intake forms, you just have like a generic contact form with Google Analytics, like you do not need HIPAA compliance for your website. Now that doctor needs to be HIPAA compliant, obviously with the doctor's practice.
yeah,
But beyond that, it's fine. So.
Yeah, but if you're doing anything like that, I would definitely first talk to a lawyer that specializes in that area just to be safe.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion, whether it's healthcare or law. So I would definitely say, if you are in that area, talk to a lawyer even for just 10 minutes, and just make sure that you're getting what you need in there.
Yeah,
and that's a cool, one of the features we have with Termageddon is we're very lawyer friendly. I think that's why we have so many law firms using our platform, because we have an override feature where your lawyer can review the policies and then even like edit sections if they may so choose. And what's cool about it is those sections will remain intact. Whatever you overrode remains intact. But when new laws go into effect that maybe require an update to that section, we notify you via email and in your dashboard saying, hey, a new law has passed. We think you have an overridden section that's now allowing us to push an update. Do you want to review what the new suggested copy says?
Awesome.
Giving you the ability to change it out and so forth.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right,
So,
should we talk about disclaimers
that's really,
real quick?
and if Mateus could send me an email, Hans@Termageddon, I'd love to see that article that he found confirming that coaching does not require HIPAA compliance. I would like that for my own little research, so it'd be appreciated. All right, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so since somebody had a great question about health and all of that, let's talk about disclaimers and who needs them and why. So disclaimer is a statement that makes certain disclosures and helps reduce your liability. So like I said earlier, those 90s exercise videos that say if you're short of breath, if you're about to die, stop exercising, that's a disclaimer. And there are a variety of different disclaimers that apply to different situations. So when does somebody need a disclaimer? So you should always have a disclaimer if you advertise third-party products or services. A disclaimer in that sense would say that you're not necessarily endorsing those products or services, you have no control over those products or services, and you don't operate the website that shows that product or service. So if somebody clicks on an ad on your website, you're not liable for anything that happens. You're not liable for that product or that service. You're not the one making sure that it's okay for the consumer to use or that it doesn't cause injury or something like that. It's just an ad. So that's a place to have a disclaimer. Sell or display health products. That one's very popular when it comes to things like vitamins or supplements or nutritional shakes and stuff like that. That disclaimer would say something along the lines of, make sure you speak to your doctor before you take any of these products. They're not intended to diagnose, treat, or, cure any particular disease. We see those on vitamin bottles all the time. But if a consumer is shopping online, they might not necessarily see the back of that label just by the way that pictures are created. Or they might not be able to read it because it's too far away or something like that. So a disclaimer will make sure to take care of that. Whenever you participate in an affiliate program, so if you are participating in Amazon affiliates, let's say you have a yoga course and people can purchase a yoga mat through your website by going to Amazon, and it's an affiliate link and you get a cut of that purchase. You need to make sure that you disclose that on your website. That's something that the Federal Trade Commission is cracking down on pretty frequently because consumers should know whether or not you're getting paid to promote a particular product, and the FTC agrees on that. Also, most affiliate programs that you'll end up participating in have this in their terms of service and require you to have a disclaimer. Provide health and fitness advice. That one we already spoke to. If you don't feel good, don't continue this fitness program. That one's definitely definitely very important, especially with people that have pre-existing conditions and stuff like that. If they do certain exercises, they might get worse. And you want to make sure that you're not liable for that just because it's the internet. I mean, you don't know exactly who you're providing this advice to, and it just might not be the best advice for their situation. And then lastly, provide information that could be seen as legal advice. So if you have a business coaching course, if you are giving advice on stocks, if you are giving advice on purchasing a car or even negotiating contracts, you want to make sure that people know that this is not necessarily legal advice. Just because advice on websites is very general, it might be correct for 99% of people, but there's always going to be that one person that it doesn't really work for. And you just want to make sure that you don't get in trouble with that one person. So I think our last topic is going to be where you can get these policies.
Yeah, and let's just take a quick pause for Chris. Did any disclaimer related questions come in?
Not yet.
Okay, cool. It's a disclaimer is a really simple document, but just making sure. All right, cool.
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah. We discussed the three really important, very popular sets of policies that are used on websites. Well, now the question is, where do I get one? And I think you probably already know, and it sounds like already a few people have visited Termageddon, which is awesome. But there's really two main ways to do it that I think are worth us suggesting, which would be attorneys or generators. You'll notice there's a third one, templates, which we did not include. We don't suggest using a template. And if you haven't drawn the conclusions as to why, I'll just share them. Templates do not auto-update when the laws change. Templates are, you don't even know what you're getting with those free templates online. I would say, if anything, it's hurting you more than it's helping you, because it makes you think, oh, I have my solution now. I don't have to look at the law anymore, which I think is a very big mistake. As I shared those three things around the privacy policies, if you're collecting personal information, you need a privacy policy. Privacy laws do not care about where your business is located, and you need to have a strategy to keep it up to date. Attorneys and generators are the way to do that. Hiring a privacy attorney, nothing beats it. That's the best way to do it. And I want to be clear, I'm saying a specialized attorney, not just a general business attorney, an actual privacy attorney. And if you have an attorney in place, I would suggest asking them, hey, are you comfortable not only providing me a privacy policy, but also what is your strategy to keep up to date when new privacy laws go into effect? And hopefully after watching this presentation today, you have enough ammunition to know that are they monitoring all those privacy laws? Can they speak to those privacy laws? Really make sure you hire a good privacy attorney, not just a general privacy attorney. And I say this very seriously. We have so many law firms using our platform, and I've reached out to some of them being like, hey, you're an attorney, why did you sign up with us? And they're like, I know this stuff is important, but I don't want to deal with the privacy law stuff. I've had that happen so many times. So just, again, make sure it's a privacy attorney that you look with. Make sure you establish a strategy to keep it up to date whenever the laws change. Now, the fact is, not everyone has 10 grand a year to do that, plus or minus 10 grand, or I guess, 15 grand plus or minus 10 grand. It's an expensive endeavor working with privacy attorneys. And the second option would be generators. So the pros to generators, you can typically generate a set of policies very quickly. And the other pro is you can do it at a fraction of the cost of an attorney, of hiring an attorney. Termageddon is a generator. We for $10 a month or $99 a year, you get a set of policies to protect your website.
Maybe we can just kind of backtrack just a tiny bit and talk about what a generator is, because some people might not know. So a generator is basically a software where you go in and you answer some questions about your business and your website. So for example, you would answer, what information do you collect? How do you use that information? Who do you share it with? And then your answers are used to create a customized privacy policy that fits exactly what your business and your website does. So that's really a generator versus a template, which is a document that's already written. with no input from you that is not specific to what your website or your business does.
Right.
So I just
Great
wanted to
call.
clarify
No,
that.
that's a great call.
Yeah.
I'm so used to generators, like I just kind of
Yeah.
skipped through it. Great point. And what's cool about our generator with Termageddon is that you answer all the questions to generate the custom policy for your website, but at the end, you click submit. And in addition to getting your policies, you get a piece of an embed code. And that's what you copy and paste into the body of your privacy policy page, for example. And that embed code, whenever someone visits that website, the embed code fires and boom, there's your policy. Well, what's cool about it, because it's an embed code, we at Termageddon can control what that copy says. And that's what allows us to monitor privacy laws and then push updates to your policies automatically when these new laws go into effect. That's why I like our program. That's why we built our program. So yeah, our job is to monitor privacy laws for you so you don't have to, is our vision behind why we think a generator is a phenomenal move for people who can't pay privacy attorneys tens of thousands of dollars every year to keep their policies up to date.
All right, and then we have our contact information here too. So if you do think of any questions after this webinar, we'll kind of do one last check-in with questions. But if you do have any questions that you think about later, which I feel like happens to me all of the time, 10 minutes after webinar's over, I'm like, oh man, I should have asked this. Here's our contact information. Feel free to also check out our website, termageddon.com. And then we're on most social media just under @Termageddon. So Chris, are there any remaining questions left or no?
Yeah. Should all websites, especially in this niche, really have at least the 3 that we discussed today? Like, should all websites have privacy policy, a separate terms and conditions, and then a separate disclaimer? Is that almost the case for all of them?
The first 2 for sure, privacy
Okay.
policy and terms and conditions. You're in the act of collecting money.
Yeah.
You fundamentally have to transfer.
And users are registering on the site.
Yes,
So.
exactly.
Right.
Like their users are registering, they're using your platform. I guess you're right. I made an assumption that people are charging for that service, but aren't necessarily. They're going through coursework, but information's being collected. There's a login portal usually. Those are complete indicators that a privacy policy and terms and conditions need to be established. A disclaimer, maybe. It depends, are you providing information that could be seen as health advice? Are you providing affiliate links? Are you providing information that can be seen as legal advice? Disclaimers are more optional.
So pretty much everyone should have a privacy policy and a terms of service, but not everyone might need a disclaimer.
Can you speak? Go ahead.
And I think one question that I get all of the time is people that want to combine their privacy policy and terms of service into one page. I feel like I see this at least a few times a week, and that's really not a good idea because multiple laws and multiple courts have found that when you combine a privacy policy and a terms of service into one page, it's really confusing for the consumer as to what exactly is happening. And then you actually can't get consent when both of those are on the same page, because you don't know if the customer is consenting to the privacy policy or if they're consenting to the terms of service. So I would definitely recommend that everybody has a separate page for their privacy policy and a separate page for their terms of service.
Excellent. And one more question for you. We talked about health and fitness. Another big industry in this community or niche is in business. And sometimes that often involves something that's going to help you make more money. If we even use our own software, like LifterLMS as an example, people make money with it. But can you tell us what area we should be thinking about when it comes to like income claims or showing testimonials of people that made money, or making statements about making money or specific amounts of money that have happened in the past, or what we think you might be able to achieve or whatever? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think the Federal Trade Commission has really good guidelines on like false claims or misleading claims, for example. So one thing that I would definitely make sure that I do is, number one, say results are not guaranteed.
Or not typical. Or if you're highlighting somebody who's like did really well, like, yeah, this
Right.
person made $1 million, but that's not typical, right?
Yeah. Or, you can also say you might not get the same results as this person.
Yeah.
I'd also have a terms of service that has a warranty on it that says we do not warrant anything. So if I say that you will make $1 million from this course, that could be potentially seen by a consumer as a warranty. Like, I will make $1 million. And when I don't make $1 million, you have breached that warranty and I can sue you. So terms of service that says there is no warranty on the products or services sold on this website is definitely a good place to start as well, just to make sure that people understand that this is not a warranty, this is just an example.
And also, it's not an excuse now to say you're going to make $1 bazillion if you use my course. That doesn't give you the right to just start spamming basically people and misleading people. Like, this is help. You got to have a good head on your shoulders too.
And if somebody is being paid for their testimonial, like if I have one of my course students that did really well and I'm like, oh, I'll give you $10 if you leave a testimonial, make sure you disclose that as well. That's something that could be seen as misleading to a lot of consumers if you're not disclosing that that person was paid for their testimonial.
So that's a paid endorsement or something.
Right. Yeah. And, if you are providing business coaching on how to make money, also make sure to have a disclaimer that says that this stuff is not legal advice. So for example, if I say, take a second mortgage on your home and invest it into a timeshare business, maybe that could be seen as legal advice by some consumers. Like, oh, it's okay for me to take out a second mortgage and use it for this purpose, even though it might not be. So just make sure you have a disclaimer that says that this is not legal advice. And then lastly, I would say, from what I've gleaned from Federal Trade Commission's guidelines, and by the way, I got to throw a props out to them because they have one of the best websites and blogs I've ever read. It's actually super funny. They have awesome jokes. The Federal Trade Commission is where it's at for this kind of information.
Noted.
But if you're ever bored. But one of the things that I would say I have gleaned from their expertise and their advice is make sure that you're honest with your subscribers. Make sure that you're honest with the people that are interested in purchasing your course or are purchasing your course. If you've never seen a single one of your students make $1 million, don't make those claims. But if you see, 90% of your students make $10,000, I mean, that's a valid claim. But you have to make sure that you can back this up. So if you've never had any person ever tell you how much money they've made, and all of a sudden now everybody can make $50,000, that's not a claim that you can back up. So make sure that you keep those records of, people that have told you that they've made this much money, and make sure that you have a valid basis for making those claims that you're making.
Super solid. Super solid. Thank you for that advice. Donata and Hans are from Termageddon. There's a link in the chat. You can go to termageddon.com. And if you use coupon code LifterLMS, you're going to save 10%. If you're live watching this video with us right now, we are going to put this inside the LifterLMS webinar vault. So this resource is not going to go away. It will be here indefinitely, because there's a lot of, at some point, every WordPress LMS website builder needs to put a quality, terms and conditions, and privacy policy page on their website, ideally before they launch or write, as part of their, go live process. It's a mission critical piece. And I love what you all have done in terms of using a generator. I've paid those big legal fees for these custom privacy policy, like handwritten deals, and it's super expensive. So when I heard about what you all have going on here and how it's customized and it's automatically updating in real time, anytime I call my lawyer, boom, there goes $500 just for a quick question or whatever. Like, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited with what you all have built to help people level up as course creators, as membership site builders, as coaches, as professionals, and whatever it is that you do that are watching this on the legal standpoint, because it's not something you can ignore.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that, Chris.
I mean,
It's awesome.
that's one of the reasons why we started Termageddon is I used to write these policies for my clients as a lawyer. And I would charge a lot of money for it, and it was actually really monotonous. And I noticed that I was like asking a lot of my clients the same questions. I was like writing similar language, and I'm like, I kind of don't feel okay charging this much money for it because I feel like I can reuse a lot of my work. So, and it was getting kind of like monotonous and stuff. So that was my reasoning behind Termageddon is, you know, those crazy legal fees don't need to be like that.
Well, and yeah, it was crazy because, you know, we created Termageddon before GDPR even was enacted.
Yeah.
We were just like,
Well, good timing for you guys.
yeah, we were dating at the time. Like we would have never guessed. Now we have 12 states with proposed bills. The number's growing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a nightmare. You know, so I think we're in the right place at the right time. The fact that we can help small business owners get up to speed with like privacy laws and stay up to speed. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
Staying up to speed, because if you have a privacy policy that you paid $2,000 for an attorney, you know, and you got your privacy policy, well, did you get it in the last 45 days? Because if you didn't, on 45 days ago, the UK left the EU. Have you updated for that? 65 days ago, the CCPA went effect. Has it been updated since then? 6 months ago, Nevada's update went into effect. So how old is your privacy policy? Because it could have gone extinct the very next day from keeping you protected. So like, what's the point of having it if it doesn't work, you know?
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah.
And actually that brings me into one thing I did want to kind of note real quick.
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts by Hans. Yeah, here we go. This will be profound.
Of course.
On the generators page, we were talking about generators versus templates. I think Donata did a really good job explaining the difference. But I get this question a lot. Why don't I just use WordPress's default privacy policy? I think it's a very fair question. I mean, it's right there in WordPress. Why don't I just use this? Let me be super clear on this. You can go to Slack and speak with the privacy group on Slack, the people who built that portion of WordPress, and ask them, hey, is this compliant with the law? And they'll be the first ones to tell you it's not. They built the privacy policy page to create awareness of the importance of privacy policies. And the creators will be the first ones to tell you, like, no, you should absolutely have a strategy to keep it up to date over time. So
that is awesome. We just drew our winner of the $99 LifterLMS giveaway. So congratulations to Ray Kesk. You're the winner of the $99 winning from LifterLMS. Send an email to team@lifterlms.com and we will hook you up. Donata and Hans are at termageddon.com. Go check that out. Use LifterLMS as a coupon code to save 10% on your initial purchase. I just want to thank y'all for coming. This is a great service to this community, and I'm excited to turn it into an evergreen resource for the hundreds of times I get asked about this to now be able to be like, just go watch this. So thank you. Thank you very much for coming, and keep doing what you all do. And Kathy, thank you for putting on the webinar. Thanks everybody for coming live on a Friday, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
It was awesome
Thank you, Kathy.
being on here. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.